on locations throughout the world.
Standing passengers, please do not lean against the doors.
Picture goers, we bring to you new films of interest.
Chicago in State is next. Doors open on the left.
The miracle of the motion picture.
Please be considerate when talking on your phone or listening to electronic devices.
Chicago's a nice town if you're looking for pizza.
Hello, welcome to 4 Stars, a Chicago film podcast, a podcast about Chicago and film. I'm one of your hosts, Paco Alvarez, a journalist based in Chicago. As part of our coverage of the Chicago International Film Festival, my co-host Jeremy Martyr had the pleasure of interviewing Curtis Miller, the Chicago-based director of A Brief History of Chasing Storms. In A Brief History of Chasing Storms, Curtis takes us on a road trip through Tornado Alley, an ever-widening region that extends from Texas and Oklahoma across the Great Plains and up into Wisconsin and Minnesota. Along the way, he reflects on the multifaceted myths and histories around the famously destructive weather events recounted by those who have been impacted, as well as by opportunists looking to profit. This was a really great conversation, and I'm jealous that Jeremy got to do it. You should check out the movie wherever you can. It'll be showing as part of the film festival on Saturday, October 25th at 12 p.m. with Curtis in attendance. Hope you enjoy the conversation.
All right, and welcome to the podcast, Curtis Miller, director of A Brief History of Chasing Storms. How are you doing, Curtis?
I'm doing well today. Thank you.
All right, so welcome to 4 Stars. 4 Stars is a Chicago movie podcast, so I just wanted to start things off by asking about your connection to the city of Chicago and how this project connects to Chicago as well.
Yeah, so I've lived in Chicago now for 12 years. I originally moved here for school at University of Illinois at Chicago. I did my master's in fine arts there. And I came to the school with a history in filmmaking. I studied film history and took some production classes in undergrad. But I actually moved to the city thinking I was going to focus on photography. So I went to UIC for the photography program there, but ended up studying with Deborah Stratman and Lori Felker and Fern Silva, who were all teaching there at that time. And though I didn't make very many films in school after I left, just being a part of the Chicago film community, starting to go to more things like Chicago Underground, Onion City, Reeling, all the like really wonderful festivals in town, Chicago International, sparked my interest in wanting to try to make films again. So I made a short film about the Marina Towers called Do It Again. That's this almost like it's more like a visual poem than like a narrative film, but it's just sort of about those buildings and about the way that they've functioned visually in the background of Steve McQueen, or as features in Steve McQueen films, Allstate commercials, the Nick Walinda tightrope walk. All these moments that happen there are sort of the subject of that film. My connection to Chicago is that, you know, I've like I said, I've lived here for 12 years. I've been teaching at a couple schools in the city, taught at UIC, the city colleges, and now I'm up at Northwestern University. But yeah, I really love the film community here, particularly the kind of more experimental and 16 millimeter communities here. I was just at Celluloid Now last weekend, which was a really amazing festival. And I love the kind of like scrappy DIY-ness of the city, that it doesn't seem like a lack of venue really slows people down. I've gone to, screenings that are pop-ups at Elastic Arts, or really great things at Facets, or stuff down at Doc Films. Like there's just so much happening in this city that's really great in film. Gene Siskel Film Center. I could go on and on and on about like what amazing programming happens here. And so, yeah, I'm just really fortunate to have been welcomed into some of that, and just love the energy of the city, and how like stubbornly independent it feels like people can be here in terms of, or at least the people that I'm spending time with, that are just sort of willfully operating out of the industry, but just supporting one another, and making their films and seeing each other's films and so on and so forth. There's just a really nice, tight community in this city. In the way that this film connects to Chicago, because the subject is not here. I filmed primarily in Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas. There's a couple of shots that are actually from Iowa and Arkansas and a few other places, but most of the film is in the sort of epicenter of Tornado Alley. The reason for that partly was that if you look at a map of like the annual average of where tornadoes happen most frequently, there's almost like a bullseye on Oklahoma. Um, and that's changed over time, especially now that more people live in Oklahoma. Now more storms get reported early. It's fascinating to go back and look at early maps and see how that epicenter has changed depending on like population centers and so on and so forth. But um, the way it connects to Chicago is this film couldn't have happened without the support of a lot of great artists and filmmakers from the city, just giving me feedback, watching numerous work cuts. I showed a really, really early version of this film at Comfort Station over in Logan Square. My friend Kitty invited me as part of, they had this series of like in progress critiques for projects. And I actually did one in 2022 where I just came in and basically did like a slideshow presentation on my research. And that was really fascinating to have to like put that together and then get feedback. And then the following year, I did one more round of filming and I kind of needed to give myself a deadline. I was like, I've got all this footage and I think it's mostly done, but I need the pressure of like having something to work towards. So Kitty was like, let's do something in 8 weeks. You can come and show a cut. We'll call it in progress. We'll do an invitation only thing. It ended up being a bit more public and a lot of people showed up because it ended up on Comfort Station's website. It was great. We ran out of seats, but it was really great to just get feedback from the city. And then I took that and kind of sat on it for like 4 to 6 months and just wanted to give myself a little distance from the project. But then I did another in progress edit and screening at the Block Cinema for some invited friends. And yeah, it's just like the city and the network of people that I've met over the years. They're all thanked at the end of the film. I mean, when you watch the credits, there's not a lot of people involved with this film directly in terms of like its production. Like I edited it, I shot it, all of that. But I've had like so much support and help in other ways. Like without feedback from other people, the film wouldn't have been as strong as it turned out. And I feel pretty good about how it ended up.
Yeah, the film is sort of this like this connection of webs of different images, murals, museums. Is that something that is part of your process, that you see things on your road trips and you just start to fold them into the documentary? Or was that like a thing that you planned ahead of time? You were like, I have to hit these locations.
It developed really organically, you know, and I think that's something that I wanted to maintain in the spirit of the film, is to sort of have this quality to it of like present, like not presenting, but sort of like structuring these things together that are sort of found along the way. I mean, I went out with certain intentions in mind for things. I originally thought I was going to make a film about the storm researcher Tetsuo Fujita, who taught for a long time at University of Chicago. He was a researcher there. But there was another film that was made about him called Mr. Tornado. It's a really wonderful but very like informative film. And I still thought, well, maybe I was really interested in him as like I thought he was a photographer. He took so many pictures of as part of his research. So I went down to Lubbock, Texas, to Texas Tech University, where his archive ended up. And I was just down there digging through all of his old photographs, and they opened that memorial while I was down there. It was on the 50th anniversary of the tornado, and so I had this sort of like serendipitous moment of like, oh, I'm here for this, you know, historic event, and I'm learning more about the storm and how, you know, there were all these socio-political things kind of ensnared in it too. And I just decided like, well, it's not really about Fujita. It's not directly about storm chasing, but I'm sort of chasing historical storms in a kind of road movie type context. And I wanted it to be these sort of like vignettes, like each one's like a location with people in it, and then leave it for the viewer to kind of try to bring those things together in a kind of self-built thesis or something. Um, so, yeah, I think that, it was part of the process of making this film was to just say yes to every opportunity. So I'd go somewhere and I would be talking to someone, and maybe we would spend the day together, maybe we would interview, and then they'd be like, "Oh, you know what? You should go talk to this person." It's funny. I made like what I consider a Gantt chart. I don't think that there's like a strictly like it's not a, an industry appropriate one, but I tried to plan out, sort of like what I plan to do each day and block things out and stuff. And the more I went back more and more, I was like, I gotta just like leave big gaps in here. And so I would just take like 2 or 3 weeks at a time to go out there, and I would maybe have like 3 or 4 things nailed down before I went, but I wanted to make sure that like I had an opportunity to follow something that presented itself to me. Like Andrew Zagorski, who owns the Oz themed storm shelter company that's in the film. I was calling around to a bunch of storm shelter companies, and they have a lot of overlap with like prepper culture, and so I think they're actually like they tend to be a little suspicious of outsiders. They want to know like what is your game for wanting to interview me, stuff like that. But Andrew was so generous and was just like, yeah, come see my thing. And I had just been in Liberal, Kansas at the Dorothy Wizard of like Wizard of Oz and Coronado Museum that's up there. And I was like, this film has to have like a Wizard of Oz reference in it. And I think it's really funny that there's this storm shelter company. Well, they call them safe rooms, but it's Wizard of Oz themed. And so yeah, I went down there and filmed with him. I was driving the opposite direction. Like I was headed further north. I was moving away from Oklahoma, and he called and said, are you available tomorrow? And I just like immediately turned the car around and found a cheap motel in Oklahoma, and went, and we spent the day together. And then after that, I was like, okay, now where do I go? Because I thought I was going over here. And it just like, that's also where so much of the film became about Oklahoma is I actually had this intention of like, the project will span the entire. I thought I was going to drive down to the Gulf of Mexico and like film there and then go all the way up to the Canadian border and like do this big survey. And then I was like, no, I don't want to make a 3 hour film that nobody wants to watch that crams everything in, like I want to keep it a tight 70 minutes, especially if I knew like, oh, this is going to be like, I like films that are open, like I was thinking more of something like a James Benning United States of America, or like a Deborah Stratman film, or like Pacho Velez and Courtney Stevens made this incredible film called The American Sector a few years ago. That was like one of my favorite like nonfiction films that I'd seen. And I was like, if I'm gonna do what I think this is gonna be, where it's just like a series of chapters, like I'm gonna drive people crazy if this is too long. So I also really appreciate a film that's like a tight 70 or 80 minutes. So I just decided like I got to keep it focused.
Yeah, the film really moves. You can feel that urgency to move through Tornado Alley. You mentioned James Benning. That was something that I wrote down. Can you talk a little bit more about your influences and the process of shooting on 16 millimeter? The film is gorgeous, and those like most of these portraitures of America are shot on 16 in the film. Can you talk about the formats you used and talk about your influences a little bit more?
I shoot on I most of the stuff that I've done, I've shot on 16. I think for my next project, I might try to move away a little bit just for like financial reasons, but I really enjoy the medium. It's what I learned on. I was taking production classes, I think right at the tail end of, because I'm in my mid 30s, and film was kind of on its way out, but there were still a lot of production classes on 16 millimeter. And so I learned that way. I actually learned how to edit on a like just a reel to reel through a moviola, like silent, deliberate cutting on black and white reversal. Like that's how I learned to edit. I didn't edit on a nonlinear setup until I worked on my thesis project in undergrad. And so I just liked the medium a lot. I liked the economy of decision making that it forces on you, that like you can only afford so much film, and so you have to be really deliberate with what you shoot. And then you're stuck with what you have and you have to like figure out how to edit that together. This process was a little bit hybrid. Like most of the landscape stuff is shot on 16, and it was actually somewhat shot separately. Like I shot a lot of the location stuff my first and second year going out there, and then a lot of the interview focus stuff was actually the third and part of the fourth year. And I shot most of the interviews. I shot all the interviews on video, and then worked with my brother-in-law. Is He works for a company that does like post-production stuff, but they do the like the like unsung work, the like removal of boom poles or like changing the signage in the background and like the stuff that is deliberately like something you don't notice versus like the special effects that are really eye-grabbing. But one of the things they always have to do is like if something's shot on film and they have to do a change, they have to like degrain it, fix it, and then regrain it. And so he helped me like like don't be heavy-handed with how you force your footage, but there's ways that you can just like color grade it and things to look more like your film and add a little bit of like a grain overlay plug-in type thing. And so I did a lot of that work. I don't know how I think it looks good. I think it just helps bring everything together. But yeah, I mean, I shot on 16 because I like the process. I like the way that it forces me to slow down. With the exception of like the frenetic handheld stuff that begins and ends the film, which is I love like Mary Minkin, Jonas Mekas kind of, handheld stuff from that era, a lot of like, journal diary stuff as well. And so I I like that aesthetic, sort of like rushed feeling that you can get from something like that. Like Notes on a Circus, I think is the name of it, the Jonas Mekas short. That's just like his experience of watching the circus, and it's all handheld and stuff. I really love that. But the rest of it, the sort of like binning stuff is, it's all tripod, and I'm trying to compose things very deliberately. And yeah, I just like that the 16 millimeter, because I know that it's a finite resource, forces me to really slow down. And I like the process of recording sound separately and thinking about sound as something that's complementary, but is a separate process. I mean, there's a lot of that film that you think is sync and is, not. That's one of the great illusions of filmmaking, is that you can record things separate from what you're seeing and really control it. And so, with the exception of the interviews, pretty much everything was recorded without sound, and then just had to be built. And I like that process. I like using a camera that is not recording sound and then have to think very carefully about using it after the fact. Yeah, my influences, I mentioned Deborah Stratman, James Benning. These sort of like or even like Brett Story's The Prison in 12 Landscapes was like another film that I saw a while back that really moved me. I don't know, I find it really I'm really like excited by people working in a kind of nonfiction tradition that sits somewhere between like documentary and experimental, even though I don't always love that term for my work because I don't know how it sits within that tradition. But I watch a lot of that stuff, and that's definitely making an influence on how I approach things.
You mentioned like these films that have a very journalistic, like you're working through something yourself. What drew
Mhm.
you to the subject in the first place? What was your sort of childhood experience with tornadoes, with Tornado Alley, the cultural understanding, and how did you bring that into the film?
I grew up in southwestern Indiana, which is about 6 hours south of Chicago. And, I think like a lot of the Midwest, you grow up with the seasonal presence of things like storm warnings, tornado warnings, sirens going off, so on and so forth. And I was always kind of fascinated with them, terrified, but also like, I would be running to the basement or the room under the stairs at my parents' house, and would be horrified, but at the same time, like wanting to run and look out the window and see what's coming. And that's something that I learned through working, is that there's often this internal tension for a lot of people where they're both like scared of these things and fascinated by them. So, I mean, there's just always been a deep fascination, but there was also a really bad tornado that went through my town in 2005. It was really anomalous. It happened in November. It was just like a really particularly hot day, caught everyone off guard, happened in the middle of the night. The tornado wasn't massive, but it was big enough to like, I would say like temporarily, like fundamentally alter the landscape of the town. Like it just sort of cut a big mark through it, and entire neighborhoods were like all their trees were removed, the houses were destroyed. If you go there now, 20 years later, if you don't know the history, it's like you just think they're new neighborhoods. But because also the town, which is Newburgh, Indiana, is like kind of an exploding suburb of the nearest city, Evansville. And so there's a lot of new construction down there, anyways. But I just remember at the time, it was like real, it was a very impressionable thing for me, because though my family, we didn't directly like lose our home, a lot of my friends did. Um, and I had the process of going, and like I spent days digging through rubble with friends trying to find possessions, anything that they could save. I remember seeing the National Guard like holding the streets, so that only people who could demonstrate that they lived there or their invited guests could come in. Like the whole place was on lockdown. It just felt like very alien and foreign while it happened. And that was like an intense like month or two right after this happened. And then just like gradually over time, it sort of felt like a collective amnesia started to fall on the town, with the exception of those who were directly impacted. I mean, they'll never forget. But I think the rest of this city, like I like went away to college, and I would come home and I would drive through these areas that still had like empty lots and things, and just think like, wow, it's present through its absence. There's signs of it, but only to those who know what to look for, that there used to be a church here, or these houses used to be here, or there used to be old growth trees in this section. Like just learning to read the landscape very carefully in the wake of it. And still to this day, where this year will be the 20th anniversary of the tornado, and there's a very small playground dedicated to it that's in the former Eastbrook Mobile Home Park, which is where the the most of the fatalities occurred, unfortunately. And then there's another neighborhood they built to like house people, Habitat for Humanity, like help build a neighborhood down there. And like all the streets have names like Resilience and this sort of thing that sort of indirectly refer to the storm, but it's otherwise kind of not present. And so I think for me, because of the lack of historical record now of this storm, I was thinking about when I was out there seeing all of these places that it is so a part of their identity. Like Woodward, Oklahoma has multiple murals with tornadoes painted into them. Even the Plains and Pioneers Museum that we go to like look at the archival newspaper clippings. There's actually a section of that museum that I filmed that I didn't include in the film, which is there's like a Woodward, Oklahoma room. And like a lot of these places, they have a memorial of some sort. And so I was just interested in the different ways that these things get remembered, and who gets remembered, who's affected by them, so on and so forth. Because I don't believe that natural disaster is ever natural. I think that like what makes it a disaster is decisions humans make. They can have like all of our systemic problems kind of woven into them. And that sort of, I think, comes through subtextually in several of the parts of the film, even if it's not directly on the surface, with the exception of maybe Juan's interview, where he talks about kind of housing discrimination, and how that sort of affected who got harmed by that storm in Lubbock, Texas. But all these questions started to arise through like this storm that I lived through. Even there, like, the brunt of the fatalities were born of, like working class families in a development that was mostly like mobile homes. And so they didn't have basements, they didn't have access to the. Now it's required in the state of Indiana that mobile homes have an emergency radio installed in them. And I think that there is now like an emergency policy in place for that particular mobile home park. But like there's a really like dark thing that within storm culture people say is that they call mobile home parks like tornado magnets. And it's not that they happen there more frequently. It's just that like those homes are not designed to withstand the weather impacts like a lot of, middle class, upper middle class homes are designed now with design features that make them less susceptible to catastrophic damage, either through having a basement or through design features that make the roofs more resilient and these sorts of things. So it's like, the decisions that people make also influence like who's most impacted, that sort of thing. We see this all the time with hurricanes, but we don't necessarily talk about it with other storms like tornadoes. I think we're seeing it with floods a lot recently too.
Yeah, these natural disasters, as you're saying, the unnatural side of them are the effects on human lives. I think that is woven so delicately through your documentary, which is incredibly subtle work. But, Chicago is Chicago knows redlining very well. The history of Chicago is marked by the way in which human beings have been demarcated, put on one side of the highway. And you talk about that in one section of your film. You talk about redlining. Can you talk about that side of your film a little bit more? It's so fascinating to me that you talk about that through this, major tragedy in Lubbock. But there's, subtle allusions to, the way America remembers, colonization through murals and all of these other things. Can you talk about those aspects of your film a little bit?
Yeah, they're kind of like haunting in the periphery a lot of times, with the exception of Juan sort of talking directly to his own experience within Lubbock. Yeah, the Lubbock, Texas situation is interesting in that, like, I think there's a lot of work being done there to try to correct the historical record in terms of when you go back and you read about that storm from the 1970s, there's a lot of omission of the Latino community in the city, despite the fact that Lubbock has a very large and historic Mexican American community that mostly lives on the north and west side of the city. Whereas most of the money is on the south side, like far southwest side. Like Lubbock, like a lot of places in the U.S., is pretty racially segregated. And the storm, the way that it moved through the city, kind of almost fell along racialized lines in the city. That a lot of the deaths were in Guadalupe and at the neighboring Arnett Benson and a few places out towards the airport, which is a lot more working class, a lot more of the immigrant populations of the Mexican American population. The park that we're actually in was like prior to the storm was also like if you see it on maps and you talk to the locals, it's almost like it was like a temporary housing situation for migrants who would come, like migrant workers who would come up and work for the harvest season and then would go back to Mexico. Like there was a lot more, like in the 1970s, more like free exchange and movement over the border than there is now, is my understanding. But yeah, I mean, for me, I went to that memorial service and it was really moving and seeing everyone talk about this new memorial and everything. But it was like mostly the people who got most of the speaking time were like the investors and like the people who paid for the memorial and things like that. And Juan was one of the only people invited to speak. And I could tell that he was like being pretty careful about what he said. And I was really glad that, I felt really fortunate that he would talk so openly about this part of Lubbock's history, which is that, There were housing policies in place and histories of racial discrimination that moved populations to certain parts of the city. And I mean, so when I talk about like trying to rectify or clear up the history of the city, it's like Juan has done some of that, but also there's a woman, I think I'm blanking on her name right now, just because it's actually been like a year since I was last in touch with her. I think her name's Christy, but she's working with the Latino Lubbock newspaper there, and she always does an article each year on the anniversary to talk about like the impacts of that storm on Latino culture, because like before there was even a memorial in the city, people were writing songs about this in Spanish. And like there's one song in the film that plays all the way through, but there's actually like 5 or 6 songs written in the 1970s about this storm. And so there was already a kind of storytelling happening because of the omission from the newspapers and all these other things. It was like the community was recognizing itself, even if the city wasn't recognizing it. And then the other stuff, it's just like, the history of the United States is a history of colonial expansion. I mean, I felt like for a while we were starting to openly talk about that, and now it feels like we're being asked to forget it and to think about it as this sort of like neutral manifest destiny that was. So history is contentious right now, and has always been, but is particularly right now. And I was just interested in how the like signs of this, the way in which like Woodward, Oklahoma, is brands itself as a kind of frontier town, and it was actually, I'm pretty sure Woodward was founded through one of the land rushes that happened in Oklahoma, which was, I think it's even in the Cherokee Strip, which is a really problematic thing because it was territory that was basically coerced from the Cherokee tribe and given to mostly white settlers through this act of land rushing, which is, for people who aren't familiar with that, was basically like you'd line up on the edge of the territory and that somebody would blow a bugle and you would like run out and like stake your claim literally. And schools in Oklahoma used to do this. They used to like reenact this as part of like a high school tradition and stuff. And they might even still do it. I mean, it was kind of like a no-no thing for a little while. Like people were like, maybe this is insensitive. There's a lot of indigenous communities in Oklahoma. This is like, basically like sort of rubbing in the face of people who are still living there that like we did this, we took this land. And so like in Oklahoma City and a few places they stopped doing it, but I would be interested to see if those things are starting to come back, because it feels like there's a real desire to undo any sort of like reckoning with the past that maybe happened in the last 10 or so years, which was still entirely incomplete. Like I think a lot of people still don't want to talk about kind of the darker sides of things. And so like for me, it was like I knew that I wanted the film to just kind of stay focused on the storms, but I like films that sort of have these like peripheral connotations and things, and was just like I can't avoid this entirely. I also don't feel like I'm an authority to like address it directly, but like yeah, it's there in the murals, the kind of like classic propagandistic sort of images of empty teepees and the settlers arrive and that sort of thing, sort of implying that like people just left. Like there's like all that stuff is in there, like visually, even if it's not addressed like through voiceover and things like that. It's just yeah, it's the like pioneer, like manifest destiny, colonial expansion, all of that stuff is like it's part of the identity down there. I think even the Blackwell, Oklahoma section near the end, it starts with like there's a mural of a guy staking a white flag into the ground, because Blackwell was also founded through a land run. A lot of the Oklahoma towns that I filmed in were founded during various land runs. So yeah, I just like wanted to kind of like let that sit there in the film. And it's also like, if it's one of those things is like, if and I'm hoping that people will see it and they'll like want to learn more about it.
There's something so American about that, about like turning all this like the thing that I was so interested is like the ephemera, the things that are left behind, the dusty signs, the museums, the murals, as you're saying, the songs. Those seem like obsessions that you have, that you're interested in, that get communicated about some the way that we remember things. There's a side of this that repeats itself when something as big as like the movie Twister comes out, and
Hmm.
an entire town's economy sort of seems to run around the idea that this thing happened. Can you talk a little bit about that side of things and your experience with something as big as a Hollywood production going into this town that has clearly hit some economic hardship, and the way that that is remembered?
Yeah, I mean, it's not featured in the film directly, but not everyone loves that about Wakita. There's definitely some older families who are frustrated that that is the only identity it has to outsiders, but it is so much a part of the identity of that town, and its economy. Thousands of people every year drive to Wakita, Oklahoma, which is not on a major highway. It really is something you have to drive to. You're probably not going to drive through it. And yeah, I mean, Wakita I mean, it was also chosen for those reasons. Like when I was talking with Linda, she was like, they liked that it was like far enough away from things that, they could control audio and these sorts of things. And like they knew that they could basically like take over the town, which they did for a summer. It's not said explicitly in the film, but when Dwight, who's giving us a walking tour, talks about how all these buildings used to be on Main Street, those buildings were actually torn down for that film to be used as the rubble that we see in the street of that like amazing, crane shot where we see the debris of the city as they like some of that was like trucked in and brought in and stuff, but some of it was Linda talks about how they had a really bad hailstorm and they couldn't afford to repair things. And so a lot of people were just like, just tear the damn thing down, just like and so that's another reason why some of the locals resent that film is they feel like it destroyed their town, because they tore down a lot of buildings in the process, as part of prop making, including the house that Dwight talks about as Aunt Meg's, which if people have seen Twister, they know that they all go to her house for like a steak lunch. And then later on, they have to go rescue her, and the house collapses. And that was an actual house that like
Wow.
was on that block that is not there anymore. It's now a butterfly garden. It's a really beautiful small plot of land now, but there's just this like photograph of the house on a plank of plywood mounted on a post that sort of marks that it used to be there. And there's a lot of that throughout the town. In the film, you see these little placards that are like 4x5 or 4x6 photographs from the movie and then like from what used to be here. And they're just sort of installed on all these vacant lots in the town. Um, Dwight even says at one point, like, nothing's left but pictures. So it's like all these things are gone. And what's left now is just like these small sort of visual records, of the movie production and things. But also people like, it people work jobs on this and stuff too. Like Dwight was some sort of like AD type role on the film. And he has some fond memories of working on it. He now, has filmmaking aspirations of his own. And so it's like it's not like it was all bad, but it was definitely a thing that transformed the town. And there's definitely like a before and after. And not that Twister was responsible for the decline of the town, because there were other things happening around farming at that time that were just sort of transforming all farm communities throughout the country, including my own town. Like where I grew up, Newburgh used to be a farming town and is now a suburb. And a lot of the same things that happened out there were happening in Indiana, were happening in Illinois, farms getting bigger and becoming sort of run more like corporations and less like family farms. And the same thing was happening in Wakita. And so like it's just that like the film interfaced with that, like it happened at the same time and it presented certain opportunities. Um, for production design for all of these things. And some people in Wakita were really happy for it to happen, and others weren't so much. But yeah, it's just interesting the way that I mean the place where the museum is now was like the production office for the film, and all the stuff that they have inside of there for the most part were just things that they left behind that they asked if they could use to build into a museum. There were a couple of things that were like donated. Like I think Bill Paxton gave a few things. I think that the pinball machine that we see in the film that is still there, to my knowledge, I think that was a gift from Bill Paxton. Like he was given that, and then he gave it there. The town was really fond of Bill
I
Paxton.
love that
They were like,
aspect.
yeah, they were like they have really fond memories of him.
Yeah,
And
he
there's
comes across
also I don't
well.
know, yeah, he does. And there's also a line up there that I if people don't know Twister, they'll miss. But there's like a memorial to Philip Seymour Hoffman too. But it says Dusty, which is his character name.
Wow,
But because
missed that.
a lot of storm chasers like Dusty, and they see themselves as Dusty.
Yeah.
He's a character that a lot of people like.
Hey Curtis, give
Yeah, I
me.
mean that because that film is part of the reason I was interested in that too, is that for a generation of storm chasers, that film is so influential. Like if you
Yeah,
talk to anyone my age or like a little older or a little younger, from like 40s to late 20s, like Twister is like when you ask them like, why do you want to become a storm chaser? They often talk about maybe like Reed Timmer and some of these early storm chasers who were on like Travel Channel and things like that. But they always mention Twister. And then the older Storm Chasers mentioned Wizard of Oz. And I'm sure that new Storm Chasers will mention Twisters, the sequel.
I'm not so sure
Um,
about that. Curtis, I am a high school teacher, a film
okay,
teacher, and I teach at Chicago Academy for the Arts as well.
cool.
And one of my students, she just graduated last year and is going into meteorology. Is still just obsessed with the movie Twister.
Yeah.
She asked us. We teach a film aesthetics course, and she all year she was pushing for Twister. And
Uh-huh.
I was like, I don't know if there's that much, film aesthetics. Like it's a fascinating movie. We
Uh-huh.
could talk about the cultural aspects of Twister, but I was like, I don't know if there's that much there. The very last day of class, we watched Twister, and it went over like gangbusters. Everyone loved it.
I mean, Jan de Bont pulled off he basically made a tornado into like a Jaws movie or something, it's like it's the white whale kind of narrative. It's a monster movie, it's a road film, it's a love story. It's like all of these things. And yeah, it's like high concept Hollywood stuff, but it is a fun movie. I mean, I have probably seen that film more than any other movie, even if I talk about like James Benning or these other people being influences. Like I would be lying if I didn't say I also just love the movie Twister. Like I grew up watching it. I still probably watch it once a year. It's like comfort food for me.
So the final section of the film includes you being embedded with storm chasers. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and a little bit about how you pick your documentary subjects?
Yeah. So the final chapter of the film then sort of leads into what's almost like the film's coda or something, where we're on the road chasing storms, and then we're on the side of the road filming them. Yeah, I one of the ways that I structured this film, because it's not like a traditional narrative, was that I wanted it to become more and more like I become an embedded subject. Like it begins very much with like a lot of there's like voiceover at the beginning, kind of describing the region, and then we go through a town in these like sort of slow, patient tripod shots, and then gradually over time, like the camera works much more handheld. You start to hear my voice occasionally. It feels more like the filmmakers present, I think. Um, and so I wanted it to be like, sort of start at a distance and then get closer. Because I think for me, one of the things I was feeling is this like push and pull of like wanting to observe this stuff and like how it functions culturally, but then also remembering the original like impulse for it too is like I wanted to see a tornado in person, and I wanted to experience this thing that scared me and that, can transform lives, but I want to just like feel its raw power too. Um, and so I knew like when I sat down to edit, I was like, this is going to be a series of these vignettes, but I wanted to build towards like something that approaches like the sublime of standing on the side of the road and seeing this massive wall cloud kind of moving toward you, that sort of thing. How I choose my subjects, a lot of it's just organic. I don't know. I've been talking to some friends about this since the film showed last weekend at International of just like I'm trying to think of like what might have motivated me. It's a lot of times it was just like a gut feeling of like I think this person's going to be and a lot of it had to do with just like it felt like they were being really generous with me already, like they were very open and they seemed like they weren't very intimidated by the presence of my camera. One of the things that I knew that I wanted to do is I wanted to keep it to basically just me behind the camera and them on camera. So they have a wireless lav mic on, but otherwise, like there's no other crew there with me. It's just me and the person, which I think allowed for the conversation to kind of run in different ways. But yeah, I mean, I chose like the storm chaser who's in the film, Matthew Ropp, who's like got this really great car called Primo Victoria. That's sort of a character in the film as well. I met Matt at a storm chaser car show in Wichita, Oklahoma, and the car that won was this sort of like, vehicle that someone clearly put a lot of money into and was like sort of it looked like a military truck basically, right? And it was impressive, but then I saw Matt's, which got second place, and I was like, I've always been really interested in people who are kind of like, I think it's unfair to say amateur because that word gets misused, but just like the people who are like the passionate weekenders or like the ones who are fitting it in outside of the work that they have to do to live the what like I grew up going to a lot of like dirt track racing on weekends and stuff and being around people who like work in factories and then like drag race on the weekends or whatever, and I've always found that side of organized sports or any activity like being really interesting to me. Like I like going to watch like the Railcats play versus the Cubs or something, Isn't that the team over in Gary? I think
Right.
it's,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but I just always have been interested in sort of that side of things. And so Matt is like, he's very passionate about storm chasing. He's got this car that he's built everything on it himself. Like he's wiring all the lights on. And I just found him to be really funny and fascinating, and he's a great storyteller, and a really generous, nice person. Every time because he's the one I've probably been in the contact with most. He's the only person who appears twice. He's in like the Primo section, then he shows up again in Blackwell where he lives. And yeah, I was really charmed by him. I think his like I think the way he looks at the world and the way that he reads weather and stuff is really fascinating, because he has this whole like cosmology around it, and like it really means something to him in a way that I found really fascinating and interesting.
He was so engaging, and the way he talked about it, you're right, was not like the polished or like media trained version of talking about these things. It came from a place of passion, and those sort of subjects sort of speak throughout your film. Were there any moments where like you felt like you were in danger, or was that sort of a little bit at a distance?
My wife was like having a panic attack watching the conclusion of that film this time because she knows the dirty secret, which is that all that storm chasing footage at the end, I'm filming while driving, which I shouldn't have been doing. So, like, yeah, there were definitely some bad decisions made that were dangerous. There, especially early on, I kind of went into the subject arrogantly where I thought I could just like download a radar map and drive out into a storm and get as close as I could, and that would like yield some interesting results. And the first time I did that, I realized pretty quickly that that was a poor decision. I had a moment where I was driving down a very slippery, muddy road in northern Oklahoma, chasing a massive hailstorm, and I was on this farm road, unpaved, muddy for miles. And then I get to a culvert and there's supposed to be a bridge. And Google's telling me to keep driving, but like the bridge is out and there's like construction signs. And so I have to turn around and drive back miles on a dirt road directly into the thing I'm trying to outrun. And I end up like driving into hail and I'm like panicking and trying to get out of there. um, I tried to chase a storm in Arkansas, which is really challenging because the roads move, like the terrain there is very hilly actually in northern Arkansas, and so you think you would be driving east away from the storm, and then suddenly the road would U-turn and head back the other way. And so there were definitely, particularly early on, some moments that were dangerous. And then there was a moment where I was filming with a storm chaser, and he wanted to do something called core punch, which in storm chasing just basically means like you're trying to get to the other side of the storm, because it's a better vantage point or whatever. And rather than trying to drive around it, you just drive straight through it. And he was like, if you're not comfortable doing this, that's fine, but I'm going to do it. And I did it with him. And I was like white knuckled the whole time. My wife's going to hate hearing this part because we've
You're
talked
here.
about these things, but like, yeah, I she knew that when I came home from that trip, she was just like, all right, so what did you learn? You know,
Yeah.
and I went out storm chasing a few more times after that and just was a lot more careful. But um, yeah, what's interesting about Matt is not someone who just like drives recklessly towards whatever's the nearest tornado. He's very careful. He really knows the weather in ways that I found um, really impressive. Like he at times he's sort of like pointing at his phone and stuff, but he's also there were moments that we filmed together that didn't make it in just because of like sound quality issues or
Mhm.
whatever, where we're just like standing on the side of the road and he's just describing to me what he's seeing in the sky. And like I feel like I've learned how to do that a little bit, but the people who like, do it all summer for years on end, like can just look and see like they can recognize certain behaviors happening in the atmosphere that I think is just really impressive that people can eyeball that. Um, and so, yeah, when Matt goes out, he's not trying to get close to the thing. He's actually, a lot of what he does is like, he almost sees it as like a community service. Like he goes out and he's like a trained storm spotter, and he will actually like call in things to make sure that people know that, hail was reported in this area and stuff. Because you can see a lot on radar, but you still need what's called ground truth. It's what they often call it, which is just like that somebody who's trained to recognize the thing can call in and report it. Um, and so there's this whole other side of storm chasing, which are these people who are performing like a community service. And then there's tourists like me, who are out there making bad decisions. And I really kind of grew to respect the ones who just do it for these other reasons. I mean, it's still bound up in photography. I think that's one of the things that initially interested me is that like I met a lot of storm chasers, but I didn't meet a single one who like didn't have a camera, you know, because there's still a part of it that like you have to take a photo of what you see, and that was something that I found really interesting about it all. I mean, the last shot of the film is me filming storm chasers who are photographing the storm. And for me, one of the linkages throughout the film, if you watch for it, is that like there's actually a lot of conversation around photography and about images of tornadoes. And for me, the history of the tornado is also a kind of photographic history, because it's so bound up in how it's pictured. What part of the reason we think of Oklahoma, Kansas, North Texas as being the epicenter too is just like there's a lot of really beautiful photographs from there. Um, like per capita tornadoes in the country, I think is actually higher in Florida than in Oklahoma, but people don't think of Florida when they think of tornadoes because the tornadoes there are often embedded in rainstorms and you can't really see them and they're small and they're just not as picturesque. Whereas the ones that happen in the plains are usually in storms that don't have a lot of precipitation. They happen around sunset, so they're like gorgeously lit. They're always like golden hour photos when people capture them because it's almost like clockwork that a lot of these storms, they like the heat starts to rise in the afternoon, and then right around 6 o'clock, the storms start exploding, and then like tornadoes blow up like right as the sun is perfect. Like it's like odd how photogenic these storms become. And I think that's a big part of why we remember that area is because we just have more pictures from there. Because there's storms in Ohio and Illinois and Indiana, where I'm from, but they often don't look as good. There are more trees, there's more rain.
Yeah.
The storms east of the plains tend to be high precipitation, so you just can't see as much.
Yeah, I do remember I grew up in the city. I grew up here in
Mhm.
Chicago on the north side, and I remember being told again and again as a child, like you don't really need to worry too much about tornadoes in the city. That's more of like a suburban thing, or if you're out
Mhm.
or mobile homes, as you were saying. I feel like increasingly, more and more each year. There is a tornado that touches down in Chicago. You sort of leave us off on this message of like, the storms are kind of happening less often, but they're getting stronger. And there's
Uh-huh.
that sort of like hint at like, climate change, disaster stuff. Can you talk a little bit about that as well? Because I do feel like that encroachment on different spaces, or people who feel like they're comfortable, or people who just imagine them as a thing that happens in Oklahoma, isn't exactly the reality.
You know what's interesting about the Chicago aspect is I've heard that too, that like, well, maybe the lake is a mitigating factor. It sort of disrupts the heat rise, this sort of thing. Or it has to do with like the fact that the city sort of has its own microclimate because of all the concrete and things. Like, I've heard these stories about how like Chicago is safe, because it's in the plains. It's like in the part of the country where they have tornadoes in Wisconsin all the time, not that far north of here. And there's been tornadoes recently in the suburbs. There was one that like kind of grazed the top of a few buildings in Rogers Park not too long ago. There was one that was seen out by O'Hare a couple years ago. But when I talked to a few meteorologists and I asked this question, and they were like, from a scientific standpoint, like the data doesn't actually suggest that Chicago's tornado proof. It might just be lucky. Like there have been storms that move out over the lake. It's not impossible for it to happen. It might be less common to occur right here because of these small microclimate aspects, but it's not tornado proof. And yeah, I mean, the climate change part is definitely there. I mean, everyone out there recognizes that the weather's getting weirder. Like everyone I talk to acknowledges in some way, whether or not they are a skeptic that we as humans are causing it, nonetheless, like they can sense that things are changing, that things aren't the way that they were when they were younger. And the data seems to support that. Yeah, it's just like, my understanding of how like weather models are have historically worked is that they are fed by historical data. And if the things that are happening now don't correlate well to the historical data, it also gets harder to kind of to know exactly how things are going to behave. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of even among those who like accept human-caused climate change, there's still some disagreement about how that change is going to impact the region. Some people think that the area of Tornado Alley is actually shifting east because
Hmm.
of certain things, and that it's going to happen more in like Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, up through Indiana, which is really scary because more people live in that part of the country than like Western Oklahoma, which is fairly wide open terrain. I mean, most of the tornadoes that happen out there just kind of result in some property damage and some crop loss and that sort of thing, but they often miss homes because there's just a lot of open land. Whereas if you move further east, it's more densely populated. So some people think it's shifting, some people think it's growing,
Hmm.
some people think that it's happening more often, some people think it's happening less often, but they're more intense. I think there's definitely data to suggest that like F3 to F5, which are the more dangerous tornadoes, are maybe becoming more common. I think there's been more F5 tornadoes. There haven't been a lot in the most recent few years, but a few years back, there were like a lot of them. And it does seem like maybe intense storms are happening more frequently. I don't know. I think that it's undeniable that things are changing. Yeah, I just hope that we are brave enough to respond to it and try to do something because the future, because for me the big part of what motivated this film is that like, you know, I see, you know, the human caused influences on this stuff and all, you know, and that the weather is changing and you know, more than anything, I wanted to like learn from people who already exist through like weather extremes because I think that more of us are going to live through weather extremes in the future, unfortunately. I think that even in my 10 years in Chicago, it just feels like the only thing that is consistent is that the weather's inconsistent. I know there's always been that joke of like, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, but
Yeah.
I feel like there were still like seasons. And now I'm like, wait, why? It's October. I don't know. It's just like things
No,
are
you're
just
right.
so they're like harder. They just don't feel like they follow a pattern as much now. And like there were a couple of summers there where it felt like every few weeks Chicago was getting hit by a massive storm. And then this year wasn't so intense, but it's just like I don't know. For me, I just wanted to listen to people who have for decades, you know, over a century, have like lived with this stuff,
Yeah.
and just try to learn from them.
Even over the course of this Chicago International Film Festival week, there's been like 4 different seasons here in Chicago. So, people are really getting the experience of the city through that. Um,
Hmm.
do you have sort of a next steps for this film? Is there a vision for where it's going to end up, distribution, or just what your plan is with it?
I think I can say because the contract's been signed, but it's gonna I'm gonna distribute it digitally with Grasshopper. It's a really great distribution company. I really love their catalog of films. Some of my favorite documentaries, nonfiction films of the last decade have all come out in some capacity with them. So they're gonna handle kind of like digital, educational, non-theatrical distribution. The film doesn't have a theatrical run planned, but I do want to kind of tour it around a little bit. I think it's a film that generates a lot of interesting conversations. And so I have the idea to, you know, I've got a few like universities and things lined up next year that I'll take the film to and do like talks around it and stuff. But yeah, I'm still trying to figure that out. You know, I come to filmmaking kind of through the side door. I worked mostly in like fine art and contemporary art of the last decade, but increasingly more interested. I just love theaters and I love watching stuff in a theatrical context. And I wanted this film to have that and not play like with folding chairs in a gallery or something, because I just think there's something really wonderful about being in a dark room with a group of people that you may or may not know and like having this experience together. And so I'm hoping that it'll keep playing more places. It's going to play at IDFA in Amsterdam in November. It's played a lot of festivals this month, unfortunately, that I haven't been able to go to. It was down at Hot Springs and Tall Grass, which is a really great festival over in Wichita, and then Tacoma Film Festival. Like it kind of played all of those places right now. So I couldn't make it to everything. And so it has one more screening at Chicago International. It's playing next Saturday on the 25th. And then, yeah, it'll be in Amsterdam in November and then to be determined for next year. There might be one or two more screenings in the Chicagoland area next year. We're still getting it buttoned down, but there's a couple of universities that have expressed interest in maybe doing a screening with some invited panelists and things like that to talk about some of its themes and stuff. So, yeah, that's sort of the plan for it right now.
That's really
I mean,
exciting.
ideally it would end up like maybe streamable somewhere, but I do think that like watching it in a theater um is still my preferred mode for it. But I know a lot of people watch stuff at home, so
Yeah. Maybe we'll time it up for the release of the third Twister movie, Twister with a 3 instead of the E. And that one is set in
yeah.
Chicago. So that'll be the Chicago movie version of the Twister
I think you're
franchise.
joking, but
I
if you're
am
being,
joking.
yeah, if that were actually happening, I'd be like, oh, this is going to be fascinating. Yeah, I feel like the only time we see tornadoes in big cities, it's like in a like
Day After Tomorrow. Or
yeah, it's like a disaster film like that,
yeah,
right?
that would be interesting to talk about the actual human impact on these things. Maybe
Hmm.
maybe they'll hire you to do it, Curtis. Um, you could bring your 16 millimeter camera onto that Hollywood set.
Right, yeah.
They love
Producers would
green
love
lighting
that.
that.
Yeah. That was a challenge of this film is like I did try to seek funding occasionally, and it's really hard to sell people on like a I'm here's the concept. I don't really know what it's going to look like at the end. You know? You need to have more of like a roadmap than I did. So these types of films I think are hard to find funding for, at least at the early stages. It gets easier once you start to actually have a thing pieced together. But
Right.
I wish there were more organizations that were there to fund harebrained ideas that they have no idea how they're going to turn out. But I know why foundations don't do that. But I think that that's actually where we need more money is not on these like guaranteed successes that are made by named people that everyone already recognizes. I wish there were more places gambling on young filmmakers or
Yeah.
unknown filmmakers making projects that they're passionate about, but they don't quite know how they're going to carry out. And not just in the kind of like workshop or like there's those places, there's the kind of like pipeline for development labs and things like that. But
Yeah.
I wish that there was also just like
Take a
more
flyer, take a chance.
yeah, exactly. Just throw some capital at a project that may or may not work. But I know why people don't do that. But I wish maybe there was more of that,
Well,
not
now
just for me, but for other filmmakers who I know have struggled with it.
now you have this project that is done, completed, and demonstrates your capacity. Do you have a next project? Do you have something that you're interested in, or is it just sort of like idle fascinations that you'll discover later?
I have a couple of ideas. This film has parts of it that that didn't make it into the film that I still think are worth tying up. And I'm someone who really likes short films too, so there might be one or two shorts that will be kind of companion pieces to this that I'll finish over the next year or so. But I've got a couple more projects sort of in early development that I think could become feature length. I have like a long-standing interest in the presidential turkey pardon, and I kind of want to make a film about it. Mostly about like where these turkeys end up after they're pardoned. And I think it's a really goofy tradition that starts with Herbert Walker Bush, but I think it, like this film, could be like a subject that has all of these other socio-political implications around the nature of pardoning and legal system and like presidential pomp and circumstance and like how these things are done. And all of that. But who knows if we'll have any more? I mean, Trump tore up the Rose Garden, and that's where it used to happen. So I don't know or what the next one will look like. Maybe he won't pardon it. Maybe he'll do something else. I don't know. So I have no idea what that film would look like or feel like right now, but it is something that I'm kind of baking and trying to. If anyone wants to gamble on a project about turkeys, I've got like some contacts and things that I want to start next year, and just need like a push
That's
to maybe get it good started. But
that's a great call to action. I just bought a Bolex, and I'm learning 16
mhm.
myself. I have no idea what I'm doing. I didn't go to film school, so I sort of got into filmmaking and film stuff through the back door just by working in film stuff. I torrented Adobe Premiere when I was in high school so that I can learn how to edit.
Yes.
And like I have sort of found this sort of back channel into the movie world. I work at the Music Box Theater, and
Cool.
I do, I'm a manager there, but I also do programming. And I'm not like a real programmer. I didn't like study all this stuff, and I'm learning how to have conversations around film,
Hmm.
um, and learning from people who sort of have that. Like I've learned that like most people didn't go to film school. Most people who are in this space, like even if
Right.
you did go to film school, you got into it in a back channel or from a cousin who had an 8mm camera, or
Hmm.
everyone has their own experiences, and that's been such an experience for me. So
Yeah. I think that can be a strength too, like sometimes you internalize a specific way of making if you go to school for it that shuts down creative opportunities, I think sometimes, because it can be really powerful to just like have the camera and not really know how to use it at first and figure it out along the way. I teach video classes, but within the art department at Northwestern. And I'm always thrilled by some of the crazy ideas that some of my students do because they haven't learned like how you're supposed to shoot with these things.
yeah,
And then they do really wild things. And I'm like, you should do more of that because that's actually like something I've never seen before. Like novelty can sometimes come out of places like that. And I do think it's good to eventually start to learn the traditions and that
yeah,
sort of thing. Like I think it's important to know your history, but at the same time, there's something useful about like being outside of that. There's
yeah.
there's a lot of great filmmakers who didn't go to film school, or maybe studied other things because
Hmm.
Herzog always talks about the importance of like life experience
Just
and
go
being
do
able to
stuff.
tell. Yeah, exactly. So I think that there's real meaning behind that.
Yeah.
And like, I think my film seems fairly polished, even though like the real industry heads can probably find issues with the way I've color graded and things, but like, it's pretty amazing what you can pull off with the Adobe suite and a couple of cameras yourself. So
No, it looks
I
it looks stunning. That was sort of what made us want to talk to you, because we're such supporters of Chicago Film Society and people who
Mhm.
uh,
Great
talk about this
organization. I
stuff,
love the
right?
matinees.
I know
I go
they
I go to
kill.
the
Oh my
like
god, they
I go to
kill it.
the silent matinees all the time, and Celluloid Now
Oh,
was
Cellular Night was
wonderful.
good.
And
I was working throughout almost the entire run of Cellular Night, except for I made it to I don't know if you were at the Korean shorts
no, I
program.
didn't make that one, but
It was
yeah.
awesome though. Like just like the work that
Yeah.
people are doing in the city, outside of the city. Do you have like plans to show it on 16, or is there a print?
There's not a print because half of it was shot digitally. Getting it transferred is just prohibitively costly. Like I've looked into it. I've got um, a guy who can do it at a discount that maybe at some point in the future I'll make a print. I would love to because like I almost did like a surround sound mix of the audio. But then I just kept it in stereo with the thought of like, well, then if I have to make it mono when it goes on to 16, like it
Right.
wouldn't lose that much. But no, I think it would be cool to see it on film. I would be curious to see what that does for it. But no, there are no plans in the immediate future. I when I priced it out through like Cinelab or one of the others that can do a digital to film, especially with sound. I think it was going to be like $8,000 to make the print or something. And
Nice.
so that's like a third of the overall budget of the
Right.
film. So
Well,
unless I find someone who wants to help me pay to make a archival print and have it end up at like, Chicago Film Society or something
Yeah.
in an archive, like I would love to do that if anyone wants to collaborate and help me make that happen. But
That
until
seems
then,
worthwhile. Like, I mean, there should be that sort of, we're not exactly
well,
living in
date,
the best
well,
time for public funding, but there's things that like people should be investing in, people who shot on 16, making sure that these things stay around.
yeah, and end up on 16. Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, the other thing too is like we have this tendency to think like digital data is somehow like permanent, but like
Right.
data rot's a real thing, hard drives corrupt. Like I actually, it makes me a little nervous to know that I've got this work that only exists on hard drives and like because we know how film prints behave over time now, and we know that if they're stored correctly and they're handled certain ways, they're printed on certain bases, like they're going to fade in certain ways or they're not. And like,
Right.
we just like have a lot of,
Information about like over
uh,
time.
yeah, and people have
Yeah.
really studied their behavior. And so, um, and there's people out there who are stewarding these films, and I'm really happy that we have people out there doing that. But and I'm paranoid about digital stuff, so I have like everything on multiple drives and do
Good.
all of that. Yeah. If you are a filmmaker working with your materials digitally, like the adage I was told is like two is one and one is none. Like
That's
you have to
perfect.
you need redundancy in your and where things are saved because one of those drives is inevitably going to fail and there's RAID drives and all sorts of stuff out there too. But like I
Yeah.
would love for there to be a film print and then it's just like held somewhere and it comes out every once in a while and shows and then it can have a digital copy that circulates places as well. But until that opportunity presents itself, it's probably just going to be digital. But I would be very open to that. I would love to hear it and to see it shown that way.
That
The
the funding of that will be in your rider for Twister 3. When they
right,
hire you, you're
yeah,
like, you
yeah,
have to preserve
yeah.
my former films.
My next project will just be like, there's this like $8,000 line item in here for a previous film. Can you explain what that's doing there?
Don't worry
Like,
about that.
don't worry about that. Yeah. You can just take out my fee, just make the film for me.
I mean, we were joking about that, but it's not that crazy because considering the fact that the guy who directed Twisters he made two movies before Twisters, and they were both
Mhm.
independent features.
Yeah, I
So
mean, is it Minari?
yeah, Minari. It was
That film
Lee
is
Ching Dong.
incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
incredible stuff. And I
Yeah.
wish that Twisters was more Minari, but
Yeah.
I'm being a little rude to
Yeah.
Twisters, I think. But
I mean, it's there's definitely some ambition in that film. Like he wanted
yeah,
to talk about like disaster capitalism and stuff. You could tell that
yeah,
like he wanted to have a little bit more meat in this genre film. Like you can sense that there was like a desire to make this more than just like a sequel to a 90s
I get
thrill
the
ride.
pitch.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but it is still kind of just a thrill ride.
Hmm.
And I'm kind of fond of it, even though parts of it are a little, not my cup of tea. But I will still probably rewatch it.
Yeah.
I think I've watched it twice already.
How many tornado features are there? There's not that many.
Well, there's
So
the Day of the Twisters with Devon Sawa that a lot of people forget.
what is that?
I think it was a made-for-TV movie that came out in the 90s.
That's
I think
awesome.
it's called The Day of the Twisters. Yeah,
Yeah, the
and it's a
Twisters.
sort of like family drama where like I think there's some sort of like you're not my father anymore kind of drama happening between Devon and his family, and they like are reunited through the storm, and it's a very much like ABC Family style, or like my
cool.
mom, my grandparents were subscribers for these like Christian friendly home like family movies. And I think that it was in there with like the Buttercream Gang and like Rent a Parent and like all those movies that were like approved by whatever like content board.
Broadcasting, yeah.
Yeah. So that's out there. I think there's another one called Twister from the 80s that I've never seen, but has like a family on the cover getting picked up by a tornado on a couch.
Wow.
Um,
The SEO for that got totally fucked over.
yeah.
That's
Or maybe it's
Twister.
called Tornado. I
Okay.
don't know.
Either way, it's not great to search the word tornado and find a movie. If you search Twister, you'll find the movie.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I have dozens of tornado footage compilations that I've bought over eBay
nice.
over the years. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that was trying to capitalize on Twister coming out in the 1990s that like
The
if you look
runoff.
at the yeah, if you look at the backside of these, because some of them are called like Twisters,
Right.
Fury on the Plains, and they like present
Colon.
themselves like they are the
Sequels.
sequel or something. I forget what that's called, but like when people try to
Yeah, those sort of run.
emulate,
They're not called ripoffs. They're called. There's
there's a
a
term
term
for it.
for like the fake Pixar movies that they make that are like supposed to look like they're
I
like
think maybe Good Times, which was like a tape company. I think they put out some of that stuff.
oh
Like when
interesting.
like when like Aladdin came out, because Aladdin's like the original story is, in public domain or whatever. They made their own Aladdin and they made it kind of look like the Disney
Yeah,
one, and they were hoping that like moms would
you'd click
like
on the
rent
wrong
it on.
one.
Yeah, you'd rent the wrong one at Blockbuster or
Right,
whatever.
right, right.
Well, there's a lot of tornado stuff like that from the 90s that I think was just trying to capitalize on the popularity of that film. And so when you look at the back of these tapes, the release dates on them are like so many of them are the year after Twister came
Nice.
out, like when it would have been on VHS. I can imagine just the rush on this stuff where people's like, we got to get as much tornado footage as we can.
Yeah.
And some of them are just awful. They're like, there's like home movie footage, which is interesting. And then they'll just be like a 1950s faded red like educational print
Oh
on
man.
like the behavior of clouds sort of like dropped in the middle, but it'll say like it's over an hour of footage on tornadoes, and like 20 minutes of it, 30 minutes of it is just filler. And they all kind of have the same clips in them too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Have you seen Sharknado? Do you have
Yeah,
opinions on
yes.
Sharknado?
It is fine to watch if it's on a TV playing at a bar, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's the right environment for it, or like, watching movies like that with groups of friends is fun, like I've been to screenings of The Room and like gone that route too, of like it's so bad it's good, it's so
Sure.
bad it's fun. And like Sharknado at least is like I think they're pretty aware at how absurd that film is,
Right.
but yeah, it's I can't remember how many of them there are now.
I
There's
feel like
like
they did that to themselves where they just were like, all right, repeat the formula, do it again. And they didn't know
this time it's a fire tornado
right,
or
right, right.
whatever.
This time
Like,
it's 18 tornadoes or whatever. It's like, that's not more exciting. Or like this time it's a squid in the, but yeah, there's so much,
yeah, I mean I don't really like I'm as I get older, I have such limited time to watch movies that I don't spend as much time watching things like that. Like
yeah,
when I was in my 20s, I was like, yeah, let's watch Birdemic.
yeah,
Let's
yeah, yeah.
watch like these things. But it's because I had,
So
I could
endless
stay up
time.
all night just watching stuff. But now I'm like, I need 8 hours of sleep and I have too many responsibilities.
Right.
And
I'm not working on one of my many projects.
yeah. And so like now it's, but I still try to go to the movies at least like once a week,
Yeah.
if I can.
Yeah, it's important to me to work that time in. But
Mhm.
I'm usually if I'm gonna watch trash, I prefer trash from a while ago that has been
Mhm.
curated and programmed by someone who has a deep affection for that trash, as opposed to like the ironic viewing experience of The Room or something. It's like
Right.
no, like there's like a 70s, kung fu movie where they didn't finish editing it, and so it's interesting and woolly and weird, and there's so much love and passion in it,
Hmm.
even if it's not great. Yeah, I prefer movies like that as opposed to the ironic viewing experience, or like that
For
self-aware,
sure.
the
Yeah.
meta experience. But um, I, I have an affection for that stuff that is the unfinished or the unpolished, or
Hmm. Yeah, me too.
even the big budget versions of that. I'm like, yeah, if there's love in it, if someone's passionate about something, it's, you know, it comes across to me.
Yeah, there's a like a smoothing effect too of like a few decades where like you can just recognize like the hard work and effort that was put into a thing, even if it wasn't executed perfectly. Plus,
Hmm.
you have all the like the lore and the story building and stuff that often happens around things after you have that much time removed from it too, that like helps you to see it in a different way and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you went to, there was the like, I'm blanking on the full name for it, but it was the like 16 millimeter bonanza that happened at Music Box that
Oh
was like,
yeah, I was working that night. It was
what are
the
their
two
names?
names.
Yeah, I'm blanking on their names. I should know them because I know they're filmmakers and they
Yeah.
make, I've seen there's
God.
Chris and
Yes,
I'm
Chris is one of them for sure. It's not Chris and Samantha. It's Chris and yes, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's
like
so
that was
interesting.
really fun too. And it wasn't just like an ironic viewing. It
No.
was like there was a real love for this stuff, but also just a recognition that like, man, trailers were so raw in the
Yeah.
1970s. Like I would even watch like films that I think are really good, like Shock Corridor, that
Mhm.
Sam Fuller film I think is really interesting. And then like to watch the trailer for it, I was like, this looks like a terrible movie. Like
Yeah.
they really emphasize the like this weird like sort of romantic interest in it. And I'm like, I barely even remember that being a thing. I feel like that was like what gets him there. And then the movie takes on all these other subjects, like all the Sam Fuller stuff does, where it's like
Yeah.
on the surface it looks like it's just a Korean War film, and then it's actually about like racial politics back in the U.S. or whatever,
Right.
like um it's just like, but none of that nuance is there in a 45-second trailer that's just like,
Get them in the
see
theater.
see the most shocking. Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
man, the I because I don't like trailers now, and I feel like trailers now even bait and switch you, but in different ways.
Yeah.
Like going into one battle after another, I expected a very different film just from like the short snippets you see on
They did not know how to market that
social.
movie.
They
You
did
can
not know how
tell.
to market that
They
movie. They
were
did
they were
not.
so confused in the marketing of that movie. But like I after watching the movie, I'm like, I don't know how to market the movie. Tell
Right?
someone that
Yeah.
it's good and go see it. Like
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I just go like the up and down. Like that's all you need to know is the journey of it. I actually I feel very similarly about trailers. I work
Uh-huh.
for my third job is that I work in post production for Music Box Films. So I
Hmm.
work on trailer cut downs, and I do not understand the marketing world. Like it's like that's even more foreign to me than film school, where it's like film
Hmm.
school. I've had to like, learn that the academic side of things as well as the teaching. For marketing, it's just like my brain doesn't work like that. So I have to learn the rhythms of editing that get people's attention in
Hmm.
a 30-second span. And I'm
Right.
like, we should let this thing breathe, or like even worse, like
Uh-huh.
making things that are shot 16 by 9 into iPhone footage 9 by 16.
Uh-huh.
That kills me every time I have to move an image that a filmmaker framed and composed. I have to move it
Right.
towards the center because people's attentions are here. It is so infuriating, but you know, that's part of the industry. So
Yeah, I mean, there's some often like I think even like there's this I think it's a Chilean film called Los Colonos, I think is the name of it. That's about the kind of colonial expansion in Patagonia
mhm.
region. It's a really hard to watch but beautiful film, I think. But I have to tell everyone like don't watch the trailer because the trailer makes it look like it's this like action movie, and it's not. It's like this weird, patient, like revisionist Western where you spend it's like more like Meek's Cutoff than it is like an action adventure film, which I also think that film has kind of maybe it doesn't have a weird trailer, but I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of times where I'm like, don't watch the trailer. Like the
Yeah.
movie, the trailer does not do the movie justice. And I think that sometimes, yeah, it's just hard to it can be hard to market certain types of films within that because trailer making is like a genre,
It is.
and like
And I do have affection for those like old
yeah, and
trailers
when
that are
people
like,
do and when people make them really well, it's like
yeah,
this is an incredible trailer, and when it
right.
happens, it's like exciting. But
But the amount,
um,
like you have to get 100 before you get a good one.
yeah,
There's like oh man, there's been a few good ones. I feel like this, the Danny Boyle movie, 28 years later. The
mm-hmm.
trailer was so good for that one.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
did you see the movie?
I haven't seen the movie yet, but I've watched the trailer.
The the
That,
the the movie itself uses so that like the voiceover from the oh my god, who's the writer?
it's
The
a
Rudyard Kipling poem, I think.
oh
Uh
yeah, yeah.
whatever poem that is. Um the trailer was so
It's in the
good.
film.
They
Yeah.
they it wasn't in the film before the trailer came out.
Oh,
And
and then they added it.
he edited it in because he liked the rhythm of the trailer so much. He added
Uh-huh.
it in.
Oh,
Um
that's fascinating.
it's
Yeah.
it's the only time in recent history that I can remember that it went in that direction.
Uh-huh.
And
Well,
Danny Boyle's
a
great.
funny thing for that, it's not the same, but like so the like modular synth stuff in my film that plays in the background of the voiceover work, that was just something that my friend Matt Sage, who's an incredible musician, playing in Constellation in November. If any of this ends up in the podcast, but he sent me that like it's like a 2 or 3 minute improvisation that he had done because I was working on a trailer that I wanted to submit as part of my request for funds from Illinois Arts Council. So I was trying to get funding to get the film processing done. And I was like, I should cut together a quick trailer for this. Here's the footage that I've made so far. Um, can you just like create something that I sent him some like other music that I was listening to at the same time. I was really into like Jean-Michel Jarre and like the
Mm,
sort of like synth stuff from around the Tangerine Dream, that
yeah.
sort of thing. And so I sent him some stuff to listen to, and then he just like sent me this piece, and I cut a trailer with it and everything. But I just kept listening to it, and I was like, there's a there's a quality to this that I actually think belongs in the film. And then I did the recorded voiceover, and it felt really dead to not have something behind it,
Mm.
and I just put it there. And so it was something that was for a trailer to try to get funding from a arts organization, that
And
ended
then
up making it into the film because it just worked really well.
that's so interesting. I do love the score and the way that it interacts with your voice in the movie. It's so interesting.
Yeah, and then the sax stuff there, Patrick Shiraishi is just like I think one of the great like solo players right now. He plays in bands and stuff too. He's actually in there's this hardcore band called The Armed, and he plays within that band. But he's a prolific musician. He's part of the like the improvised scene out in LA, I think, and like he does all sorts of stuff. He's also playing here in November at Constellation. So if people see the film and they like
The
the
music.
beginning and end and a lot of the sax work and stuff throughout the film, is that's all Patrick. And he is he is like a real amazing performer live too. It's like the only other person I can think of that like embodies their instrument as much as maybe like Colin Stetson or someone like
Mm.
that just like feels like the instrument is really like I mean there's plenty of musicians. That's just like I'm thinking of
For
another
you.
sax player and for
Yeah.
me, but like he's just like he's a really, really amazing performer. He was actually in town over the summer and played at Experimental Sound Studio, and it was
Mm.
just like one of my favorite performances of the year. As really amazing player and a very an incredible human. And yeah, I don't know Pat that well, but the interactions that we've had, he's really amazing. And I was so thrilled that he allowed me to use the music because this that stuff was like he had already released it on an album, and it was an album that I had listened to while filming. And I hadn't originally planned on using it, but like as I started cutting, I was using it occasionally for pacing and things. And originally, like Matt and I were just going to work together, and he was going to do an original script for or original score for the whole thing. And then eventually, it was just like, no, this stuff should stay in. Like it's the correct mood. I really like the way that it feels, and it was really kind of Pat to let me use it, and he seemed into the project. So
That's great. I just have one last question for you. We like to ask our guests this. What is your favorite Chicago restaurant or Chicago food place?
my go-to for a long time has been a Tontoniko down in, I go to the one in Pilsen, but there's one in Little Village too. There might be more than that, but it's just a really great taqueria down on Blue Island. Their signature taco, the Tontoniko, is like my favorite taco in the city. I like the way they fry the tortilla and things. It's really good. But I also really love Handlebar. That's like a restaurant that I've gone to since before I moved here. It's like West Wicker Park, almost Humboldt Park. It's a vegetarian, pescatarian restaurant. Um, I like the vibe. I like the patio. I like the food. So those are kind of my two go-tos.
Thank you so much, Curtis, for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy, for having me.
Please be considerate when talking on your phone or listening to electronic devices.
Doors closing.